I came across on today's LifeSite News a talk that Cardinal gave to priests, religious, and lay students of the St. Cyprian Theological School of the Diocese of Obala in Cameroon. And what he's written here, the vocation of a Catholic university, should be the vocation of every single school from kindergarten up, including homeschoolers, including the focus of families, and every single Catholic. He says, dear students of the St. Cyprian Theological School of the Diocese of Obala, today I would like to reflect with you on the vocation of a university, and in particular of a Catholic university, in the light of the teaching of Benedict XVI. Benedict XVI has emphasized this several times, quote, the original vocation of the university is the search for truth, for the whole truth of our being. And with its obedience to the truth and the demands of its knowledge, the university becomes a school of humanity in which vital knowledge is cultivated, high personalities are forged, and valuable knowledge and skill are transmitted. The search for truth is therefore your program, as your motto proclaims, in the service of truth and justice. Benedict XVI added, quote, without being oriented toward the truth, without an attitude of humble and courageous search for the truth, every culture disintegrates, falls into relativism, and is lost in the ephemeral. That's what's happened to us and to most of the world right now. He continues, Cardinal Sarah, the sense of truth is the stone which must found any solid culture. Without seeking the truth, there is nothing to rely on. Everything becomes liquid. Without the objectivity of truth, in other words, truth is what is true, what is reality. Not what I think it is, not what I feel it is, not my take, not my opinion. These are my words. But it's objective truth. We are given, without the objectivity of truth, we are given over to subjective appetites and passions. Without truth, there is no longer any objective and intangible just order. No one can be protected against capricious selfishness and violence. Truth is the only solid rampart that opposes the temptation of omnipotence and arbitrariness. Truth establishes order and justice. Its absence leaves us in chaos. Without truth, opinions collide and no one can decide between them. Beloved, I'm reading this for the first time, going through it with you, and all we need is to look at our culture to validate every word Cardinal Sarah has written. Benedict XVI knew this well. Having seen his country sink into Nazi ideology in his youth, he had seen with his own eyes a country, heir to a refined civilization, sinking into barbarism. For what? Because the love of truth had been replaced by doubt. And after doubt came the reign of violence and the will to power. This is a crucial issue for the Africa of tomorrow. I would like to invite you not only to seek the truth, but to love it passionately. The African academic world, and of course, I read this in hope of every single person extending this to the whole world and the whole of humanity. He writes, the African academic world must be careful not to allow itself to be contaminated by the mental illnesses that the West would like to impose on it. Aren't you embarrassed to be in the United States and know how we are, from our current so-called leadership, corrupting the world? We are corrupting the world. The West is afraid of the search for truth. For many Westerners, truth has become an unpronounceable term. If you speak of truth, you are accused of dogmatism, of oppression. But in fact, behind these misleading speeches lies the violence of the dictatorship of relativism, which itself is often the mask of unacknowledged financial and material interests. On December 13th, 2012, Benedict XVI reminded a group of African ambassadors, quote, these days, telling the truth has become suspect. Wanting to live in the truth seems outdated, and promoting it seems to be a vain effort. And yet, the future of humanity is also found in the relationship of children and young people with the truth about man, the truth about creation, the truth about institutions, etc. This is why it is necessary to educate in the truth and to the truth, end quote, from Benedict XVI. Cardinal Sarah continues, so let's not be afraid to love and seek the truth. The West has become skeptical like Pontius Pilate. He constantly repeats in a disillusioned tone, but what is truth? And like Pilate, he places his trust in pragmatic and often unjust political force because he can no longer rely on the force of truth. Yet, what if the truth counts for nothing? What justice will then be possible? Shouldn't there be common criteria which is truly guaranteed justice for all? Criteria removed from the arbitrariness of changing opinions and concentrations of power? Is it not true that the great dictatorships were maintained by the force of ideological lies, and that it was the truth alone that brought liberation? In a world that abhors the truth and delights in lies and hypocrisy, Pope Benedict XVI has constantly presented himself as the humble servant of the truth. This is why, as I wrote in La Nef in February 2023, he often found himself alone, facing a world hostile to all that is true, noble, just, and pure. Prophet of truth, who is Christ, in the face of the empire of lies, fragile messenger in the face of calculating and interested powers, faced with the giant Goliath of relativist, dogmatism, and all-powerful consumerism, Benedict XVI had no other weapons than words. This modern-day David dared to challenge his contemporaries by telling them, quote, the desire for truth belongs to the very nature of man, and all of creation is an immense invitation to seek the answers that open human reason to the great answer that it has always sought and awaited, the truth of revelation. Christian faith found in Jesus of Nazareth allows everyone to receive the mystery of life as the supreme truth while respecting the autonomy of the creature and its freedom. It encourages us to open ourselves to transcendence. We fully understand the word of the Lord, quote, you will know the truth, and the truth will set you free, from the Gospel of John chapter 8. But lies and compromise were not tolerated outside the church, but also within it. People were unleashed against Benedict XVI. His remarks have been caricatured. They have been distorted and ridiculed. The world wanted to silence him because his message was unbearable. We wanted to gag him. Benedict XVI then revived in our time the figure of the popes of antiquity, martyrs crushed by the dying Roman Empire. The world, like Rome, once upon a time trembled before this old man with the heart of a child. The world is too compromised with lies to dare to hear the voice of its conscience. Benedict XVI was a martyr for the truth, for Christ. Betrayal, dishonesty, sarcasm, nothing will have been spared. He will have lived the mystery of iniquity to the end. He continues, with Pope Benedict XVI, every Christian must, with firmness and constancy, affirm that not only does the truth exist, but that it is recognizable. The truth is God, and he was recognized in Jesus Christ because in him God entered the world and thus established the criterion of truth at the heart of history, according to the magnificent and definitive words of Benedict XVI. The fundamental novelty of the coming of God into the midst of the world makes us affirm that the truth has a name and a face, that of Jesus Christ, who alone can say, I am the truth. It is therefore essential that your university, and I add to that every single Christian, which is entirely at the service of the truth, is an openly and proudly Catholic university. And if it's not Catholic, if it's any other faith or no faith, including the home, you do not have the fullness of truth, because there's no fullness of truth except in the church, beloved. This is not Benedict. I'm saying it, that Christ established, which is the Catholic Church. Cardinal Seurat continues, because the Christian perspective as a framework for the intellectual work of the university is not opposed to scientific knowledge and the conquests of human genius, but on the contrary, faith extends the horizon of our thought. It is the path toward the full truth. It guides toward authentic development. You must therefore not be ashamed to be enlightened by the light of Christ. Here again, you African academics to whom he speaks have a special mission, because here again the West, that's us, beloved, shamefully, that's us, which was once Christian, now looks at its Christian roots with shame. Christ has been expelled from the university in many European countries. We refuse to see him in the light that has come to enlighten the nations, that has come to illuminate our failing reasons. Dear friends, he writes, faith and culture are indissolubly linked. Where man seeks God righteously, culture flourishes. Science develops. Civilization becomes more refined. Indeed, the search for God is the heart of culture. We have been able to define culture as the set of relationships that a man maintains with the world and others. But the highest relationship he can have is the relationship with God. This is why worship is at the heart of culture. Benedict XVI tried to remind the French of this in his speech to the Bernardines. He emphasized that European culture was born from the search for God. The monks in seeking God generated the architect of cathedrals, as well as the best musical or poetic works. European academics have forgotten this, and their voluntary amnesia sterilizes their culture, which now delights in the ugliness of a certain contemporary art or the questioning of the most solid foundations by wokeism. Your generation of African academics must therefore take over by seeking the truth made man in Jesus Christ. You will give birth to a new African culture. You will fertilize art, letters, philosophy, architecture. You will even generate a new way of approaching economics and science by putting them back in the service of man and truth. You will free them from the capitalist obsession with profitability at all costs, even at the cost of human life. By studying under the gaze of God, you will put medicine back at the service of true man by freeing it from apprentice sorcerers who want to combat the fertility of African families. You will put medicine at the service of life by freeing it from the culture of death, which causes children to die in their mother's wombs and old people to be useless for economic profitability. By studying under the gaze of God, you will shed light on the foundations of all authentic civilization, the difference between man and woman, respect for elders. You will get rid of the dictatorship of the deadly theories of gender and the LGBT lobby, which under the pretext of liberation try to impose their delusion on us. I must repeat to you the words of St. John Paul II, spoken on October 22nd, 1978, quote, "Do not be afraid to welcome Christ and accept his power. Help the Pope and all those who want to serve Christ, and with the power of Christ, serve man and all humanity. Do not be afraid. Open wide the doors of Christ to its saving power. Open the borders of states, economic and political systems, the immense domains of culture, civilization, and development. Do not be afraid. Christ knows what is in man, and only he knows it," end quote, from John Paul II. Cardinal Seurat continues, "Do not be afraid. In turn, I tell you again, you will only be fully human if you put yourself fully to the school of Christ, who is the full and complete truth. I dare to tell you more. You will be fully African if you are truly Catholic. Do not believe those who want to lock you into a folklore that they imagine to be our culture. The best of African culture is revealed and purified by the truth brought to us by Jesus Christ." And I'm going to give a little aside here, beloved, that I think the reason for this last statement, do not believe those who want to lock you into a folklore that they imagine to be our culture, is the fruit of Pope Francis's words that the only reason the African culture, the African bishops were against fiducia supplicans, blessing homosexual unions, is because it's a cultural issue with them. It is not. It's a theological issue. Bishop Sarah writes, "He, Jesus Christ alone, makes the seeds that the Creator had placed in traditional African culture reach maturity. He alone fully accomplishes the quest for wisdom and truth that our elders had initiated in the light of their conscience, and where sin and error were sometimes mixed. Let us have the courage to say it. The more Christian we are, the more African we are." And beloved, I say that goes for every country. The more Christian we are, the more American we are. Let us not allow ourselves to be locked into a false imperative of enculturation of thought. True enculturation is not a return to old folkloric forms. It is the purifying and saving encounter of our consciences today with the truth that is Christ. From this meeting, a true African culture will be born. Because culture is always a meeting between the natural desire to see God who is present in every man and God who reveals himself. Culture is structured by the bond that unites faith and the human spirit. Benedict XVI emphasized, quote, "When this bond is broken, humanity tends to withdraw and close itself on its own creative capacities. It is then necessary that the university is imbued with an authentic passion for the question of the absolute, the truth itself, and therefore also for theological knowledge, which in your university is an integral part of the training program. By combining the audacity of research and the patience of maturation, the theological horizon can and must valorize all the resources of reason. The question of truth and the absolute, the question of God, is not an abstract search separated from daily reality, but is the crucial question on which the discovery of the meaning of the world and of life radically depends. The gospel is based on a conception of the world and of man which never ceases to reveal cultural, humanist, and ethical characteristics. The knowledge of faith, therefore, illumines man's research, interprets it by humanizing it, integrates it into projects of good, tearing it away from temptation of calculating thought, which instrumentalizes knowledge and makes discoveries, scientists of the means of power and enslavement of man, end quote. Cardinal Sarah says, "I would like to emphasize the necessity of this theological work. We are sometimes asked if there is an African theology. There is no more African theology than African truth. Tell me frankly, is there an African God so that he has an African theology? Theology is the contemplation of God. God is the same everywhere and for everyone. The heavens pass away, but you remain. You are the same. God is he who is. Jesus Christ, yesterday and today, is the same. He is for eternity. There is therefore no African theology, but a Catholic theology. On the other hand, there are Africans who are theologians and who put their whole being at the service of the search for truth. As Ecclesia in Africa reminded us, the Church in Africa reminded us, quote, from the 2nd to the 4th century, Christian life in the northern regions of Africa was very intense and occupied an avant-garde position, both in the theological field and that of religion. Christian literature, names immediately come to mind, those of the great doctors and writers such as Origen, St. Athanasius, St. Cyril, torchbearers of the school of Alexandria, and for the other part of the Mediterranean coast of Africa. Those of Tertullian, a St. Cyprian, and especially that of St. Augustine, one of the most brilliant lights of Christianity. However, none of these illustrious figures had the absurd idea or the strange ambition of creating an African theology. Why then should we now speak of African theology? Every theologian should have this humble and noble attitude of Benedict XVI and say, quote, "I have never tried to create my own system, a particular theology. What is specific to me, to use your own words, is that I simply want to think in full communion with the faith of the church, which means above all, thinking in total communion with the great thinkers of the church. The goal is not an isolated theology that comes out of me, but a theology that opens as wide as possible while remaining on the common path of thought that is faith. This is why exegesis has always been important to me. I could not conceive of a purely philosophical theology. The starting point is first of all the Word, that we believe in the Word of God, that we try to know and truly understand it, then to think in deep communion with the great teachers of the faith. From there, my theology is marked by the Bible and by the fathers of the church, especially by Augustine."